Based on the current roadmap for Arknights Endfield, Tang Tang is expected to arrive as a playable unit in version 1.1, which means we already have enough information to realistically judge whether her banner is worth planning around. The one fully confirmed detail is her weapon type. Official visuals clearly show her using a hand cannon, and that alone already places her in a relatively uncommon slot at launch, since hand cannon users are not widely represented in the starting roster. That immediately gives her some baseline uniqueness before we even factor in element or role. From the recent teasers and visual cues, her kit appears to be strongly tied to water-themed effects. Translating that into Enfield's current elemental system, the most likely outcomes are either cryo or nature. This distinction matters because both elements are currently underrepresented compared to the rest of the roster. If she releases as a limited character and fills one of those gaps, her practical value rises noticeably, especially for players who are already building elemental-focused teams rather than generic damage setups. If Tang Tang ends up as a cryo unit, the biggest advantage she brings is consistent cryo application. Cryo teams rely heavily on reliable elemental uptime to trigger frozen and shatter interactions, and at launch there are very few units that can apply cryo steadily without awkward rotations. In that scenario, her value is not about raw damage, but about stabilizing cryo rotations so those reactions can be triggered on demand instead of opportunistically. If she releases as a nature unit instead, her ceiling is arguably higher. Nature compositions revolve around the corrosion mechanic, and nature units also slot extremely well into existing electric and utility-focused teams that depend on stacking debuffs and control effects. Because nature interacts cleanly with multiple archetypes instead of locking you into a single reaction loop, a nature Tang Tang would be easier to justify across several team cores, not just one dedicated composition. Her likely role is the next important piece. Community expectations are leaning toward her being a vanguard or a sub-DPS-oriented vanguard, and that actually lines up well with what her value profile would need to look like. A vanguard that can apply cryo or nature reliably is a very rare niche, and several popular early-game teams currently struggle with elemental coverage in the opening rotation. Teams built around Yvonne and Last Rite, for example, do not have a comfortable way to establish cryo or nature status early without compromising tempo. If Tang Tang provides both early deployment value and elemental setup, she immediately becomes a high-impact slot rather than a side grade. Looking at likely launch synergies, the first clear case is cryo-focused setups. If she is cryo, she directly solves the early application problem for Last Rite-centric teams by enabling reactions before your heavier units even enter the field. That alone makes her attractive for players already committed to that archetype. If she is nature and leans toward damage instead, pairing her with Gilberta becomes very appealing. Gilberta's area control and crowd management tools naturally amplify nature-based damage patterns, allowing Tang Tang to capitalize on clustered targets while corrosion effects are ticking across the group. There is also a strong case for nature burst compositions centered on Leviathan. At the moment, those teams lack a premium limited-tier unit dedicated to applying nature efficiently. If Tang Tang fills that slot, she would likely become the default nature enabler for that entire archetype, rather than a situational pick. On the equipment side, the only reliable takeaway for now is her hand cannon requirement. Without knowing whether her damage, scaling, or utility leans toward attack, elemental amplification, or cooldown cycling, it is not practical to lock in a weapon choice yet. The correct move is to hold your weapon selector until the 1.1 kit reveal confirms what her actual stat priorities are. So, in practical terms, this banner is not a blind pull. If Tang Tang directly strengthens the teams you are already running, especially cryo or nature-centric lineups that currently struggle with application or early setup, she is a strong pull. If she does not intersect with your main team cores, skipping her will not meaningfully slow your account progression. From a purely meta standpoint, her best outcome is landing as a vanguard or utility-leaning damage unit that brings consistent cryo or nature application. If she fills those elemental gaps for established teams, she becomes a high-value piece rather than a luxury pickup. Everything else depends on how closely her final kit aligns with those expectations once version 1.1 details are confirmed. But what do you think? Let me know your thoughts in the comments below. If you enjoyed this breakdown and found it helpful, make sure to subscribe for more. Thanks for watching. Take care, and I'll catch you in the next one. Peace.